Now, a major new policy is sparking concerns this morning after President Bola Tinubu approved a 15% import tariff on petrol and diesel. While the government argues this will boost local production and stabilize prices, critics warn it could push pump prices past 1,000 naira per litre, deepening the cost of living crisis for many Nigerians. Now, on today's show, we'll break down what this new tariff means for your household budget, the prices you pay at the market, and the country's broader energy security. Now, joining us in the studio is former senior government relations officer of the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas public affairs analyst, Iliyasu Gadu. Thank you for joining us this morning right here on Trust TV.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers.
Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome on Daybreak.
All right, looking at the new 15% tariff that's going to be placed on petrol and duty, a lot of Nigerians will ask, how is it going to impact me? So how will this 15% import duty on petrol and diesel translate into changes in pump prices for ordinary consumers?
Well, the best way to look at this policy is to take it, in terms of stages, short term, mid-term, and long term. Well, in the short term, it is likely that it's going to result in a spike in prices, because then at the moment we have not made any concerted effort, that is to stem petroleum or petroleum products import. So those importers of petroleum products that have already placed orders or have stocks would naturally transfer the costs they have to pay, or rather if they have to import, they have inventory of importing, they have to transfer the costs on the consumer, which is you and I and everybody else. And also, we have to look at, a lot of the petroleum products we use here are, for industrial use, for instance, diesel, for transportation and all that. So all that is going to have, at the initial stage, a spike in the costs, and it's going to raise inflation. But at the middle term, it also it's also an opportunity to adjust. Now, when we become when the importers see that there is no other importation to do, they will now have to be forced or compelled to find ways of pooling their resources and building refineries, and so that would help us in the long run to maximize our petroleum potential. I mean, local production potential. But then, of course, you want to ask yourself whether the government did this, just merely to collect taxes. Because you see, there's a catch-22 situation here. While the government is, may want to say, yes, we're going to make a lot of money from taxes, from, the import, the charges now, the corollary effect may just be, in the long run, beneficial to Nigeria, because then we are likely to have players who will come into the industry to establish refinery. If they find that, look, the cost of importing petrol or petroleum products is very high, the incentive is now to say, look, why don't you pull our resources together and then establish petroleum refineries? So when we have refineries, then we can maximize the potentials. And over the long term, perhaps maybe the inflation will go. But it depends on a number of factors. Are we going to maintain the incentives? Are we going to incentivize our people, more and more people? Remember, the government of Obasanjo, provided licenses for Nigerians to come and set up, refineries, so as to at least domesticate the supply of petroleum products here. But only a couple, maybe Dangote and Bua, have taken up the offer. The rest have decided to stay, hedge their bets and decide to import. So whether this is now going to be a game changer in the whole thing, because if you want to look at the benefit of this, you don't look at it from the short term, you look at it from the long term. Because
But then speaking of the benefits from a broader perspective, what specific economic objectives is this 15% import duty, on petrol and diesel going to achieve? Is it going to be, for example, revenue generation, local refining protection, or forex conservation at this point?
For me, I think it's a big basket. You are casting a big net into the water or into the sea to see how much fish catch you'll have. And for me, what I think the government is interested primarily, at this stage, is to increase the revenue take from 15% of, if you put a 15% import duty on petroleum products, you're likely to make a big catch. Then also, it's also another way of saying, look, we're tired of subsidy. There have been a lot of people, fat cats, really, who are, latching onto foreign importation to import all kinds of products into this country, some of them of low quality, and they make a lot of money out of it because then they, through the process, they charge the whole thing to the customer, which is you and I again, and the country especially. So at the initial stage, yes, the government stands to make a lot of money out of that, but then eventually, as I said, it's a catch-22 situation. It's going to be beneficial, and I believe that some of these things are incidental. The government may not have factored that in. That's the fact of helping Nigerians, or rather people with capital to set up refineries. But it's a situation of, okay, the game is open. Go ahead and do it and get some. It's now time to walk the talk in terms of maximizing the petroleum potential of this country. NNPC has not come to the table, but I think with the example of Dangote, I think we are going to, perhaps maybe that's where the benefits are going to come from. I know, for instance, that he has increased he intends to increase the capacity of the refinery to up to 1.5 million barrels from the 650 he now has. So in the end, we're going to have local entrepreneurs, coming in and then providing the platform for localize the potential of petroleum industry and petroleum products in the country.
Okay, let me take you to the rationale and implementation. The FIRS indicated a 30-day transition window for cargoes already in transit. Now, as an analyst, how is the government ensuring transparent and non-disruptive implementation of the tariff? And what measures are in place to prevent market manipulation? Because how the whole thing is, there should be something like that.
Yeah, the devil, as they say, is in the details. Very often in this country, we put up policies and then follow them up. That's the problem, is in the implementation.
Yeah.
And, in this particular case, that has a tendency, it has a potential to revolutionize or to take us to where we want to be in terms of petroleum products in this country. I think the government must have to be very vigilant and thorough. It's not just about, okay, we have set up, we have implemented this. There has to be thorough vigilance with the authorities, respective agencies of government.
NNPPR, yeah.
Yes, a lot of them. The downstream,
and
mainstream. All the regulatory agencies must ensure that this policy is, on the surface it looks like it's just about revenue, but on the other, there's corollary effects down the line. Like, the issue of ensuring that the importers, who, as you rightly said, are on the way, have them cargoes on the way now, must not, must not beat the policy by, extending their distance. If they've been given a 30-day moratorium,
Yes. Window period.
Yeah, it must be 30 days. There shouldn't be any other thing, because some people would like to, we know Nigerians, that's the way things happen in this country. Some people will look at, no, I'm making this, I'm making that. And then some people will now wait until maybe a few days and then import and say, well, look, I've gotten this. But that is where the regulatory agencies will come in. And also to ensure that the 30 days, moratorium should not be extended for no other reason. Because if you do that, then it has a spiral effect on other, sector or other aspects of the policy, which is not going to, at the end of the day, make it, potent as we expect it to be.
All right.
Okay.
Now, as an analyst, what indicators do you think suggest that the import duty will actually incentivize domestic refining rather than, simply increasing costs for importers and consumers as well?
Well, if you look at the oil industry generally around the world, in most countries, oil industry, in fact, virtually all the countries that have, thriving oil industries, oil industry is a trust. It's not just the government. There's a government hand incentive in all aspects of the oil and gas industries. For instance, in America, there is a lot of environmental legislation that incentivizes oil production. For instance, now in America, in the past 10 years, what has been, the main thing is that is driving oil production in America is the shale. This is a deposit of oil in certain parts of America, and for environmental reasons, it has, this oil production has not been, opened. But with the coming of the Obama administration and with the way the oil industry the dynamism of the oil industry, the American government said, look, we are going to relax some of the environmental conditions that were placed for the shale oil production, because at the end of the day, it's going to put us right up there as the number one exporter, as well as, the number one exporter of oil industry. Will compete favorably, and it is going to give us this. At the second time again, as Dangote himself said, it will help drive down the naira value. Drive up the naira value against the dollar, because then a great quantum of what we are using in foreign exchange, it's actually to finance the oil and gas industry. So if you now start the process of domesticating your oil industry potentials, then you now reduce the cost of acquiring foreign exchange. The dollar rate becomes manageable, and we also maximize our potentials, because you see, we live in an area that is quite favorable for oil export. For instance, we're just 12 days to Europe. It's 12 days to Europe, 12 days to America, 12 days to Latin America, and then a few lesser number of days to the growing areas of Southern Africa. So we're in a
favorable position.
Very favorable position. So why have we not been able to be a major exporter rather than a major importer? About 70% of domestic supply is coming from foreign sources, while we have the stuff right here. So and that's where NNPC will have to up its game. With this, with this policy now, there is no reason why NNPC should not up its game. For too long, NNPC has not been, been able to come to the party. It must come to the party. Dangote is doing a yeoman's job at the moment, but we need more players so that at the end of the day, we have fuel as cheap as possible, as affordable as possible, to drive a lot of things. Energy revolution, transportation revolution, and a lot of other things in the country. So this policy, if well managed, we just shouldn't look at it basically as an incentive, as a tool for increasing revenue alone. That would be short-sighted policy if we look at it from that. But if we look at it down the line as that key that ignites the energy revolution and subsequent subsequent effects, positive effects on our economy, that is what we're looking for. And I think it's left for the players and the government to work together on it.
But now, looking at, having more players in the playing field, one of the reasons for this policy is to protect and support local refineries. How do you think that the federal government will make it an enabling environment for these local refineries to come up and thrive as well?
Yeah, well, we already have the PIA. PIA sets the guidelines for, entry into deregulating the industry, but also, setting the conditions for which our players could come in. And before then, during the Obasanjo regime, we had the policy of licensing, get locals to to operate, build and operate refineries. But a number of conditions were not favorable to them. But now with this PIA and some of these policies coming up, I think now the door is really, really opening for local people. And as I said also, the energy market in Africa has still not been, tapped into. Even in Nigeria, we don't have a fully developed natural gas usage in Nigeria, LPG usage, all this, gas injection plants, all these are potentials. A modern country must have its energy policy spot on. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. We cannot continue to exist on 5,000 megawatts of petrol when we have wind, gas, and all kinds of energy. So these are the things that would incentivize. I believe it's not just about the revenue that the government is going to make. We should also think about using this policy as the key to open the potentials of the local petroleum industry. And that is why it's a boon for the likes of Dangote to show their stuff, to tell the Nigerians that we are up to the task. Because at the moment, Dangote is operating at the midstream and downstream areas. We need more Nigerians to get into the upstream. That's where the extraction is happening. And then it's from there that it flows down to the midstream where you have the refining, and then downstream where you have you have the distribution, the filling stations and all that. And the same thing along also with this. And I'd like to see Dangote being given a pioneer status, in terms of being as the first Nigerian to delve into refining project and to even set up infrastructure to supply to the various outlets. I think it should be given much more than this, because we need local entrepreneurs. Financing too, because at the end of the day, because right now his sources of supply, it's feedstock. It's a mix of several sources. So he needs to be able to be guaranteed. Because I say this, most of the oil and gas industries in the world, in many countries, in many jurisdictions, are actually treated as a trust. Aramco in Saudi Arabia, Pemex in Mexico, Petronas in Malaysia, Petrobras, whether it's any, even the big companies in America and all that, the Chevrons of this world, the Mobil and all, are regarded as national assets, national security assets. So they may not be, they may not be given feeding bottle, but there are incentives given to them to, to grow the industry. And that's why over the years, the industry, oil and gas industry, is more or less like a very important component of American foreign policy and energy policy. So we need to do that, because all around us, we are the biggest player in Africa, but we have not moved the potentials. Already, countries like Angola, who started behind us, are now coming up with very aggressive policies that would help local industries. We need to do that. Since we have the likes of Dangote, we have the likes of Boa, we have other people, so we need to. So that at the end of the day, the whole of West Africa becomes our captive market for petroleum products, for gas, for natural and liquefied petroleum gas, and for other uses, petrochemicals and all that. It's a whole new world out there. We need to be able to get these things very seriously and squarely put on.
Okay, Mr. Iliyasu, how does this tariff align with or contradict other recent fiscal and monetary policies like the removal of fuel subsidies and also floating the naira?
Yeah, well, honestly speaking, when I looked at it, I was a bit, I was flabbergasted. I said, you have tax here, you have subsidy, removal of subsidy here, you have loans.
Exactly.
So is that not too much a packet for the government? Because at the end of the day, you are loading the deck. And how are you going to manage it? Because if you have, if you now, you are removing the subsidy that gives the cushion the small person. Well, the argument might be, okay, you have people who are, who are scrounging on the fuel subsidy regime, but then go after them. If it's a criminal effect, go after them, ensure that you remove them from the system, and ensure that the subsidy meant for people who are of low income and all that gets to them. But you cannot punish the people just, and leave the fat cats, the fuel subsidy abusers, leave them. You have to find a way of, tweaking the whole thing. Then you are also, as the president, is introducing this policy, the National Assembly has given him, has approved for him to take another loan, about $2.something billion or so. So where are we? Are we not overloading the system?
So you see this as a broader economic implication? Yeah,
of course, because right now, what are you doing? I mean, you are making this money, yes, but are you investing in industrial production? A country does not become a country, a serious country, if you are not there to produce. If you cannot even produce, even the gele you have or whatever you are wearing now is produced outside when we have abundance of cotton and all that. So all of these are things we should stop thinking about just making money. We should think, raising revenues. We should think about investing in industrial production where we can compete. We don't have to provide, jobs for other countries. We should provide jobs for ourselves. Pick up the young men in the street, train them in how to, be part of the industrial revolution. We are now having an energy revolution potentially with this policy. The next thing we have to think about is industrial revolution, where we can get people to work. We can get industries that would now supply what we need. It goes together. We have the energy support, and then we have the industries. Then when we have that, we know we're truly on the way to becoming a self-sufficient country, a powerful economic country.
All right. Now, speaking of the energy revolution that you just did, what might be your projection when it comes to this tariff that has been implemented, and as well as, the reasons behind implementing this tariff? How do you see the energy sector in the nearest future, if properly implemented, and its impact on Nigerians as well?
Well, you see, this policy, we will have to entirely review the policy of joint ventures that NNPC, has been, doing for how many decades now. What are the benefits of the joint ventures? Because at the end of the day, it has made NNPC to go to sleep. Other companies come and ostensibly help you to come and extract on the technical agreement, to extract the stuff. And then, of course, they charge you cash calls for the expenses in extracting the stuff. Then what does NNPC do? It pays them for that. Why don't you have to develop the capacity to do the extraction? Petrobras is just about the same times they were set up with NNPC, but Petrobras today is it's one of the most prominent oil and gas industries in the world, competing with the Shells, with the BPs, with the Chevrons of this world. The same thing with Petronas of Malaysia. In fact, they have gone the whole gamut of oil and gas industry, operations. They are into everything about oil and gas industry. NNPC is still sitting down like a sitting duck, doing nothing, depending on JV, joint venture operations with companies that are fleecing it. I'll use that. I'm being bitter on that, because that is not what we should have. Because our oil and gas industry, since the late 1950s. If you check it, it's over close to 70 years now. We still have not been able to take at least 20, 25, 30, 40, 50% control of the oil and gas industry. We still have to rely on other companies, international oil and gas companies, to come and help us extract something that's already here. Well, and then at the end of the day, and then we have Dangote, who just came, a JJC of just a couple of years back. Now he's helping to revolutionize the energy system. So NNPC, which is the apex company in the oil and gas industry, must be given the task. We must be driven by the need to maximize our potential. It's not, don't just leave it to the Dangotes of this world, and tomorrow you start complaining that he has a monopoly. This thing rewards risk takers. The oil and gas industry is an industry that rewards risk takers, but you have to take the risk because the potentials for gaining a lot is quite there. I mean, the whole of the West African market is captive to us potentially, and then you take about down the line in the whole of Africa, we are head and shoulders above everybody else in this business, but we are not moving as we are. We should be competing for oil markets around in West Africa and Central Africa and even beyond. But we are still stuck at that stage where we are still knowing whether to how to go and extract our our oil deposits, and we have not even brought all those oil deposits that we know in other parts of Nigeria, because the PIA provides for what is called the frontiers development frontier. That's those areas that have potential to become oil producing areas in Nigeria. They're all over. Right. Gas and everything. So this is why the NPC has been found wanting and it must be up to its it raises its game to ensure that this it's an open sesame, right, so to speak.
All right, now with everything, aside from looking at the positive implications, we have to look at the negative implications as well. So do you think that there should be a contingency plan if the duty worsens inflation or triggers social unrest similar to the aftermath of the subsidy removal?
Well, that's why the government needs to come in, because if you look at this policy and you realize that you have to take everything, as I said, stage by stage. For every stage that potential effects, negative or positive. And you have to, because at the beginning, there's going to be pains. But if you follow this process diligently and ensure that those areas, the gaps where people will take advantage, because Nigerians are good at taking advantage. No matter what policy you bring in, even people will try to take advantage, not for positive reasons, but for negative reasons. Ensure that this does not suffer. I mean, the new policy does not suffer this, because, as I said, is the key to a number of things. Government getting its revenue as it projects, and also providing a playing field, a very positive playing field for local players to come into the oil and gas industry in a big way to drive the potential, to make it good for us. So at the end of the day, there must be real diligence. I mean, regulatory agencies must come in, must be very, very vigilant. The tax agencies like the FIRS must be also very vigilant. I think what institution governs our palliatives and welfare checks, because we just have to take the people along. We don't just fold our arms and say, well, as often happens in this country, let the hindmost get eaten by the hinder. No, we don't want that. Let's take everybody together, because we need everybody on board. It should not be a policy, okay, some people get the benefits and others get behind. At the end of the day, it becomes counterproductive, because there's everything for everybody in it if we can diligently and vigilantly enforce this.
Let's talk about the long-term strategy. The problems of making governmental policies is most of them are not too sustainable. You start, and before you know it, they are always short-term. So beyond this immediate tariff, what is the government's long-term strategy for ensuring energy security and achieving full domestic refining capacity, particularly concerning future investments and policy adjustments?
The PIA is there, states all of this. The petroleum, I worked on that, the PIA, because I was a member of one of the committees, the Oil and Gas Implementation Committee. It's there, it states clearly, yes, certain aspects of it are not there.
There's no transparency.
Yeah, we have the regulatory agencies, but there are certain aspects of it that are not there. I mean, they have not covered all the loopholes. But at least as a document to start, to begin with, in terms of trying to, set up, set the pace for our oil and gas industry. The PIA is a good beginning. Then the government can continue with policies like what has happened now to try to see how they can tweak it, some of these areas in terms of policy or in terms of, amendments and all that. I understand there was an amendment going, but that amendment seems a little bit suspect, because if you now try to include the regulatory agencies, the upstream, downstream, and midstream, instead of allowing them to operate as regulatory agencies, you are also trying to include them to participate in the whole thing, then that brings the transparency issue. And then the reasons why the PIA was followed, was implemented, was implemented, is countered, because you want to be able to have a transparent structure where you have the regulatory agencies being very vigilant, making sure that everybody stays on the line. And then if you now say let the regulatory agencies also be part of the game, then that's where the problem has, because in the past, before the PIA was passed, NNPC was both a regulator and also a participant under the DPR and all that. So you have to now separate the DPR, which has now been broken into three agencies. There's the upstream regulatory agencies, midstream regulatory agencies for refineries and LNG companies, for instance, and downstream for marketers and all that. So if you now are trying to reform, it's a continuous thing, really. It's not a one-stop shop. It's a continuous thing. Like this is also one of them. And so we need to be able to be vigilant, and we also need to say that, look, in the long run, as we go along, we tweak some of these things in view of what's on ground, whether it's working or not, or how do we get
by reviewing
reviewing it, and also keeping an eye on what's happening in the larger oil and gas industry in the world, because some of these jurisdictions are older than us. They have better, they have come a long way, and they sometimes set the market. They sometimes determine what the market is, and so we need to be able to put our eyes on what they're doing, so as to be able to also adapt it to our own situations here. But we cannot sit on our asses.
All right. How might the duty or the tariff impact Nigeria's inflation trajectory and, the central bank's monetary policy stance?
Well, as I said earlier, there's likely to be a spike, inflationary spike, because, it will be like everybody's trying to adjust. The importers would like to find, okay, how much I'm going to have to, because we don't have the capacity at the moment to fill up the gap. Eventually it will be filled up if the likes of Dangote and other players come in. But at the moment, some people are going to, continue to import over a certain time until when they realize that it's not going to be at their own advantage. I can give you an example, for instance. When we used to flare the gases, the gas that is produced along with oil, crude oil, and then there was a policy by government to make oil companies, international oil companies that were producing the oil, to stop the flaring and to reinject the gas that was being flared into something productive. For 36 years, they said no, because it wasn't in their commercial interest. They preferred to pay the penalties
for that,
for flaring the gas, than to invest in gas reinjection, so that at least it can help. Because first of all, there was no international market for this. They couldn't find international markets. And then there was a lot of competition. And then there were a lot of industrial unrest around, community and industrial unrest around this area. So for over 30 years, the Nigerian natural gas was being flared up like that. So, but eventually the government now sat down and discussed during the Abacha regime, and then all the conditions that the oil and gas industries, oil and gas companies, international oil and gas companies gave were met. And then we have the LNG now. We were supposed to have subsequent other LNGs, LNG Brass and LNG OK LNG or whatever, But now we don't have one. But at least we have been able to use that policy to be able to bring down, at least reduce the gas flare and make money out of it. So we need to also compel even the international oil companies to say, look, hey, you started this race, but we noticed that you do not have downstream operating companies here. You used to have it, yes. Shell, we used to have Shell Shell downstream operations, we have mobile and all that. But suddenly they've disappeared. Why? We have now opened the market. Don't just leave it to the Dangotes.
But then, do you think that the window of implementation for this duty is quite small? For example, to have people or potential people that would come in and invest in refineries, local refineries in Nigeria, and then you pick up from there. So do you think the window is too little for all that to happen for Nigeria?
I don't think the window, because we already have a capacity. Dangote has 650,000 barrels per day refinery, which is even bigger than the total refining capacity of the four refineries of NNPC. In fact, the total refining capacity is 450 for NNPC refineries, while Dangote's refinery has 650. So Dangote would more than pick up the slack. And with his plans to go even up to 1.5 million barrels, it's going to be the largest refining facility in the whole world. So that itself is something to look at. He's already thinking ahead. And we want more parties to come in, because we're not just going to be we're not just going to be located in the Nigerian market. We can also, affect positively the West African and African market. We need to think strategically. We need to think ahead and strategically. That is what is required.
All right. Quickly, before we go, a quick word to Nigerians. Nigerians would see this and would ask, what about me? What is going to happen to me? Can you give a brief, statement for Nigerians to understand how it's going to impact them short-term and long-term as well?
Well, I would like to tell Nigerians, and I also talk to the government, because the problem with our country is policy flip-flops. Sometimes you bring up a policy and it's good, it's working. Some people look at it. There are some people who are perennially looking to make Nigerians suffer. People who will say, telephone is not for the rich, for the poor. Yeah. But today we have them. You deregulate it, you make sure that, yes, the playing field is level for people who want to come in as players, for people who want to come in as nationalistic. Look, let me give you an example. A typical Italian company. You know this company called Eni. That's it, in Italian it's called Ente Nazionale Idrocarburi. That's National Hydrocarbon Trust. So the essence of some of these companies to make sure that, look, we don't make things difficult for our people. There must be a touch of patriotism in what people are doing.
All right, quickly, because the time is getting up. Time is up. We still want to hear what you have to say to Nigerians.
Nigerians is that let's embrace this thing. Let's look at this policy. It's not always that the government is making things difficult for us, but let's embrace it, because sometimes even some of the policies we see as being wicked to us are actually an opportunity for us. And the Nigerians, I know Nigerians are people who are risk takers, who have the resilience to go through, and think this in the long run will bring up positive changes for us. And people like Dangote, we need more people like that into the industry to make sure to trust. Because if you go down the streets now, people are saying, yes, if not because of Dangote, the fuel prices would have gone higher. So it's a positive development there. And even the Naira, it has a positive development on the Naira. Because if we go along with this policy to the tilt, then we're likely to have positive effect on the Naira. And then, of course, that as we go along, things are going to work for Nigeria. We're going to have that industrial revolution that we need in this country.
All right, thank you very much, Iliyasu Gadu, former Senior Government Relations Officer of the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas and Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
shedding so much light on this particular issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to Daybreak.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, that is all we have for this segment.